Greetings once again. This is part 5 of an 8-part series called Body Battles. We're talking about our health and about the war that we're in between our bodies and diseases that just surround us, and how to get over the hump on these things, how to live longer, how to be healthier, happier, save money, and just be able to be useful and be with our families and our loved ones for as long as possible. So this is, again, part 5, and I want to start out with a Bible verse in Psalm 103. Psalm 103, verses 2 to 5. The Bible says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquities or sins, and who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from destruction, and who crowns you with loving kindnesses and tender mercies, who satisfies your mouth with good things, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles." I'm here with Jack McIntosh, who's my guest for this series. He's a health educator. He's been on the radio, on television. He's dedicated his life to understanding the body. And Jack, before we get into this topic, which by the way is called reversing not diabetes, but diabesity. So Jack, as I look at this text, this passage in the Bible, it talks about healing diseases, God healing our diseases, saving us and redeeming us from destruction. We have a lot of forces of destruction. We have a lot of destructive habits around us and things that we do. And then it also talks about our mouths. A lot of that is connected to what we eat and what we put in. And it says that God satisfies our mouth with good things. So reversing diabesity, that's our title. And I think about the word diabesity. I've never heard that word before. I've heard of diabetes and I've heard of obesity. Is that a word that you made up, diabesity?
No, actually, a very smart researcher, I guess it was, at UCLA made up that word.
Okay.
I don't recall his name right now. But it's essentially what it's trying to communicate, that word, is that diabetes and obesity are related. They're part of this syndrome that we call metabolic syndrome, this cluster of disease risk factors: hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol, obesity. They tend to cluster in people. And some people will have only one of those, and some people will have 2 or 3 or all 4. But these risk factors tend to drive disease. And it turns out that diabetes and obesity are, in fact, they have common causes, and they lead to both diabetes and obesity.
Okay, and
so
how big of a problem is this? I mean, we're talking about weight. How big of an issue is this?
Well, of course, in terms of being overweight, we know that somewhere between 65–68% of us are overweight. We know that the problem of insulin resistance, which is what really drives type 2 diabetes, the latest figure I saw or heard from, for instance, Dr. Wes Youngberg, was that it's somewhere between 80 and 90% who are insulin resistant right now in this country. So it's a huge problem. Insulin resistance is the precursor of diabetes. It leads to diabetes, and we'll talk about some of the reasons for insulin resistance.
Okay, and I think that they tie into topics that we've already covered, like exercise, eating too much food and not getting enough energy out through exercise. That leads to the buildup of the sugar that doesn't get into the cells, and then it stays in the bloodstream, and we have lots of problems. Lots of problems
Cascade from that problem of the high blood sugar. But the high blood sugar is really the symptom.
Okay.
It's not the cause. The cause is insulin resistance. The problem in America is that just about all of the medical interventions try to control the blood sugar, and the blood sugar is the symptom.
Okay.
But insulin resistance is what's under there that's generating the blood sugar problem.
And explain, just in a simple way, what is insulin resistance?
Okay, so let's talk about type 2 diabetes first, what it is and what it is not.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about insulin resistance and what's the root of the type 2 diabetes problem. What type 2 diabetes is not is high blood sugar. This is what most Americans believe. They say, I have high blood sugar, so I'm diabetic. That's not it at all. It's also, type 2 diabetes is not due to an absence of pharmaceuticals. You know, when you go and you're diabetic and you're diagnosed, you would think that in order to solve the problem, you would get to the root of what's causing the diabetes, which is insulin resistance. Instead, they give you medication to increase your insulin so that you can manage your blood sugars. Well, that's not the answer to the problem. So type 2 diabetes is an insulin resistance problem. And insulin resistance is caused by essentially what's referred to as intramyocellular fat. That means that animal fats that are eaten in excess in the American diet tend to gum up the mechanisms that cause the insulin receptors that cause sugar to move into the cell. So all of us know that in order for sugar to move into the cell, it requires a hormone, and that hormone is insulin. So think of insulin as having the key to the lock on the cell, the insulin receptor.
And the insulin comes from the pancreas.
From the pancreas.
So when we eat our food and we have, whether it's starch or too much complex carbohydrates, too much sugar, it gets into the body, and then the pancreas put out insulin to get that sugar into the cells.
Into the cell.
Right? It just kind of links with it and tries to get it in, but it can't get it in, so it stays in the bloodstream, and that's where you have high blood sugar.
That's right. So the high blood sugar is the symptom. The problem is the intramyocellular fat that's gumming up the insulin receptors.
So the insulin can't get the sugar into the cells.
So you have to solve that problem before you can really do anything. So that's a problem. Secondarily, we have stages in terms of the diabetes problem. We have pre-diabetes and then full-blown diabetes. So for instance, American Diabetes Association defines pre-diabetes as fasting blood sugar of 100 or more, 100 to 125. You're pre-diabetic. Let's say you're going for a blood test tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, and they'll say to you, okay, we want a fasting blood sugar, so that means you don't eat anything after 7 o'clock tonight. So when you get to the lab, you have been fasting for 12 hours, at least. And so that's a fasting blood sugar level. And if that's 100 or 105, you're pre-diabetic. Now, when you go to the lab, if the blood sugar levels turn out to be 126 or more, you're officially diabetic. That's according to American Diabetes Association. The other marker that's used is the hemoglobin A1C. Now that's an interesting marker because it has to do with something called glycated hemoglobin. How much, glycated meaning sugar, how much sugar is attached to your hemoglobin? Your red blood cells get glycated, sugar attaches. And it turns out that when your hemoglobin A1C gets to be 6 or more, between 6 and 7, you're pre-diabetic. When your hemoglobin A1C is 7 or higher, then you're officially diabetic. Now, the hemoglobin A1C is a 3-month average. The average red blood cell lasts about 90 to 120 days, and it dies, and it's replaced. Normally, when you breathe in, your lungs transfer the oxygen to the hemoglobin that's flowing through the capillary system there, and the hemoglobin locks onto the oxygen and takes it to the cell and releases it. And the cell uses the oxygen and the sugar that's coming in to make energy, ATP, the energy that we run on. That's how it works. The sugar comes in to provide the energy, and combined with oxygen, it produces the energy that we run on, this ATP. Okay, now, when it comes to the hemoglobin, the red blood cell becoming glycated, in other words, sugar attaching, it turns out that when the regular oxygen exchange takes place, it's a reversible reaction where it releases the oxygen, goes on its merry way, comes around back to the lungs, picks up more oxygen, and then goes down to the cells and releases it. So it's reversible. Here's the problem. When your red blood cells pick up sugar and lock on to sugar, we're done. It never releases it. It's irreversible. So what has to happen is that red blood cell has to die in 90 days to 120 days in order for you to get rid of that glycated hemoglobin. And the problem with glycated hemoglobin is that it is toxic. It tears up your arteries. It causes heart disease. In fact, the number one killer of diabetics is a heart attack. And the reason is because glycated hemoglobin, sugar attached to your red blood cells, accelerates arterial damage, really accelerates it. And so it causes heart disease, number one killer of diabetics.
How does it do that?
Well, because it's a free radical. It causes the endothelium, the lining of the arteries, it compromises it, tears it up, basically, damages it. So you want your blood sugar to be lower so that you don't cause hemoglobin to attach to your red blood cells, because when your blood sugars are high, that's what happens.
You have a lot of sugar in your bloodstream.
Too much sugar attaches to your red blood cells, that's toxic. Free radical goes and starts compromising your arteries, damaging your arteries at an accelerated rate. Don't forget that. It's accelerated damage of the arterial lining. And so the problem is that high blood sugar is creating the problem with heart disease for the diabetic, and it is the number one killer of diabetics. So what we have to do is lower the blood sugar in order to stop that problem. But in order to lower the blood sugar, you can either treat it with drugs, which is to make the pancreas produce more insulin, but that's not really solving the problem.
So hold on. If the pancreas produces more insulin with the medication, does the more insulin force the sugar into the cells and out of the bloodstream?
It's a way to try to force it. Yes, more insulin will make more sugar go into the cell. But here's the problem. The more insulin you have, the more fat you store. Insulin increases fat storage. So the more you take those drugs, the fatter you get, and the more you resist your own insulin. So you see, you're doing like this. You're going down and down and down. Pretty soon you've gone from oral medications, glucophage, glyburide, all those, and pretty soon you're getting more and more resistant to your insulin. And then the doctor says, okay, now we have to put you on insulin shots. So now you've gone from oral medication to shots, but you're getting fatter and fatter and fatter. And so you're just resisting your insulin more and more and more. You're going down. You're going down.
So as far as, the title of this whole series with you, Body Battles, there's a battle going on inside between the insulin and the sugar and the cells and the fat, trying to get, the sugar into the cells. And then, like we talked about in the last program, exercise, if that's probably a key component of all this, isn't it?
Absolutely key component.
If we're getting in too much food, which then turns into sugar, but we're not moving around as much, then the cells really don't need that sugar, because the part of the sugar then is converted into the body converts it into energy in order for you to move. And if you're not moving, then you don't need it.
You store it as fat.
So it just stores into fat, and then
that's what happens.
The clogging increases, and so
you resist your own insulin more
can't
and more.
get it inside, and
exactly.
it's a vicious cycle,
cycle
going on right inside of the body.
All right, so now let's get solution oriented.
Yes.
Let's talk about how we solve this problem.
Okay, good.
We don't remember, and again, I want to say carefully that diabetes is not caused by an absence of medications. And it is not a blood sugar problem, it is an insulin resistance problem. So we must solve the insulin resistance problem. How do you solve it?
Okay.
The first thing you have to do is start moving. And the reason you have to start moving is because when you start to move, the body every time you take a step, these large leg muscles require sugar in order to move.
So it's
You've
just
gotta
requiring
get-
sugar for me to do this.
Yes. You've got to get sugar into the cell in order for this muscle to move and to
Okay,
do what.
good.
So what you have to do is place a demand on the large leg muscles of the body because they are voracious when it comes to sugar. They require a lot of sugar, a lot of energy. So what you want to do is get moving. Now here's what happens when you get moving. When you get moving, the muscles realize, you know what?
I
This
need
ain't
more
working.
sugar.
I've got to have more sugar. So guess what it does? It puts out brand new insulin receptors to accommodate the need for more
the sugar. I got
into
it.
the muscle cell.
I got it.
And then you start to burn up the intramyocellular fat that's clogging
Because
up
the
the
fat then
receptors.
gets converted back into sugar, and then the
So-
insulin brings it into the muscles.
So you are solving the insulin resistance problem by moving, because by moving, you create a demand for sugar in the muscles.
I see.
That is the answer to the insulin resistance problem. It's not medication. And even though some people do require medication, the largest majority of people, if they will get out and walk, now here it is, this is what most people don't want to do. They want to take the meds. 30 minutes, twice a day. This is how you reverse insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Brisk walk, 30 minutes, twice a day. You create that demand for sugar in the muscles. And when you create that demand, what happens is you put out brand new insulin receptors on the muscle cells, millions of them, to move the sugar in, right? And you also start to burn up that intramyocellular fat, again, that's blocking the insulin receptors. And so now you start to fire on all eight
I see.
cylinders. You're not firing on two cylinders anymore.
So those new receptors that are created, they're not clogged, right?
They're moving that sugar
And
efficiently.
so the sugar can go, the insulin can bring it in without running into a wall of fat. Because this is
Absolutely.
a new receptor
Coming
that's being
out
created
on
by
the cell.
demand.
Created by the demand.
Got
So
it. I'm just
you-
going to keep my legs moving so
Oh,
I can
yeah, absolutely.
increase my receptors.
So that is the key. Then, of course, you need to make the dietary changes. You need to go on what we call the Eden diet, what everybody out there calls the plant-based diet, because that diet is high in fiber and it causes a slow release of sugar, which means you don't need as much insulin, number one. And if you're not eating large amounts of saturated fat, you don't gum up the system.
You don't clog
get
the
that-
receptors.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
So eating foods that come straight from the hand of the Creator are designed to keep us healthy and prevent disease. And so when you do that, the combination of the diet, the Eden diet, and the walking program is extremely powerful. One potentiates the other. One makes the other more powerful.
I see. So just by eating more natural foods that grow
Plant-based
in the
foods.
ground, that if you increase your diet of whole foods, whole natural foods that have the fiber in them, so the sugar is released more slowly, and it doesn't have the saturated fat. So
From the animal products,
right?
correct?
So the receptors aren't clogged, and then if you're moving, you're creating more receptors, and the food gets in, and there's not as much clogging.
Right.
I think I can wrap my mind around that.
So you really have, in essence, the solution to this problem. But it is a very difficult thing to get people to understand that you can reverse diabetes in the absence of pharmaceuticals.
Right, rather than just
We're
managing it with
conditioned.
drugs.
Yeah, managing blood sugars is what they're doing. They're not even managing insulin resistance, which is the cause. They're managing the symptom, blood sugars, because you're producing more insulin. And again, we get fatter and fatter. So we really have to look at that problem. Now, one of the other problems that we have is that the refined carbohydrates that people are drinking, these sweet drinks that do so much to drive obesity, part of the problem is that they are loaded with fructose. And fructose really drives obesity and drives that fat connection there that we talked about. In fact, Dr. Richard Johnson, University of Colorado, I think he's head of the renal division there of the hospital. He talks about something called the fat switch. And that's where fructose is metabolized differently from sugar. Sugar requires an insulin response. Fructose does not require an insulin response. It doesn't stimulate insulin. It's metabolized by the liver. So when you're getting lots of fructose in the diet, what happens is that because you're not stimulating any insulin, you don't also stimulate leptin, which controls your appetite. So these people who are taking large amounts of these sweet drinks, high fructose corn syrup drinks, they don't know when to stop because they're not releasing leptin. Leptin controls your appetite.
So it tells the body to I'm done.
Yeah.
And I don't need any more.
But leptin is released by insulin. It's stimulated by insulin. So when you're not utilizing insulin in the proper way and it's being metabolized by the liver and you're not getting any insulin response, guess what? You don't get any leptin response. And the result is you keep going. And you get fatter
drinking.
and fatter.
I see.
And you resist your insulin more and more. So high fructose corn syrup is really one of the drivers of diabesity also. So that's a problem there.
So we just have a few more minutes left. Just kind of wrap this up and tell everybody the simple practical steps to solve this problem, to reverse this problem, and to help the body not to have this this killer disease.
So in conclusion and in summary, there are three things that you need to do to reverse diabesity. The first is to get on a walking program, 30 minutes twice a day, brisk walk.
Okay.
That will create the demand for sugar in the muscle to power the muscle. It will put out the brand new insulin receptors, and you will begin to move the sugar into the cell. And guess what happens to your blood sugar level?
Goes down.
It starts to come down gradually. All right? And this happens actually fairly quickly. In 3 days, your blood sugar can come down dramatically. So for instance, if you're taking medication, you better talk to your doctor, because if you're walking 30 minutes twice a day for 3 days, you're going to require a lot less medication than you were before. So you need to communicate with your doctor. Doctor, I'm getting on an aggressive walking program, and we're going to have to bring down, titrate my meds and bring them down. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to start to use the Eden diet, unrefined, complex carbohydrates, fresh fruits, vegetables, nuts and grains, beans, avocados, things like that, natural fats, walnuts in your diet, things like that. And that, of course, takes away the animal fat that's gumming up the system and removes that. And of course, you're getting all the phytonutrients. The third intervention is to drink water, the beverage of Eden. If you're drinking high fructose corn syrup drinks and you can't understand why you're still diabetic, you need to stop that. You need to go to water. That's the beverage of Eden. Learn to drink water. Learn to stay away from high fructose corn syrup drinks that turn on the fat switch, in the mitochondria and make you fatter and more resistant to your own insulin. So these are the 3 steps that we need to take in order to overcome the insulin resistance problem.
Right.
And I'm afraid that many physicians are not counseling their patients. You know, we've only been talking about, 25, almost 30 minutes perhaps. It doesn't take that long to educate the patient.
Right, I hear you. And I'm going to add a fourth thing, and that's to pray.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of times people don't have the willpower. They don't have the chutzpah, the strength, the decisiveness to make those changes in their life.
Yes.
And that's why we need help. That's why we need God.
God gives us chutzpah.
That's right. That's where the Bible comes in. That's where prayer comes in. That's
Absolutely.
where the promises come in. This book gives us promises that will help us to make those body battle decisions to improve our health and
Key
protect
changes,
us.
yes.
That's right. I'll finish up here again with Psalm 103. Bless the Lord. We need the Lord. We need His power. O my soul, and forget not all His benefits. He's given us wonderful things to eat, and He's given us a lot of information. He forgives our sins. He heals our diseases. He redeems our life from destruction. He crowns us with loving kindness and tender mercies. He satisfies our mouth with good things that He gives us, so that our youth is renewed like the eagles. And that's what we hope for you and for the two of us. So we'll be back for part 6 of Body Battles. Stay tuned.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Body Battles. Before you go, these health resources are available from White Horse Media. First, our book, End Times Health War, which is loaded with life-changing information about the secrets of health, plus how you can supercharge your health by adding sprouts to your diet and by drinking organic fresh juices. If you would rather read smaller books, we have the same information in these little pocketbooks: Fabulous Health Made Simple, Surviving Toxic Terrorism, Juice Your Way to Fabulous Health, and Sprout Power. You may also be interested in these other wonderful pocketbooks: Help for the Hopeless and Secrets of Inner Peace. They're all short, easy to read, and easy to share. They are all available from White Horse Media.
We hope you've been blessed by this White Horse Media production. To support White Horse Media, please call us at 1-800-78-BIBLE. That's 1-800-782-4253. You may also send your donations by mail to White Horse Media, P.O. Box 130, Priest River, Idaho 83856, or donate online at whitehorsemedia.com.
Wait, before you go, and you know what I'm going to say, if you enjoyed this message, please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. To hear more messages, check out our other videos. Have a blessed day.